Over the next 2 to 3 weeks on this show, we are going to be covering high-level changes in the NFL. That means three things to me: coach slash play caller slash scheme changes, offensive line changes, and snaps and pace outlook, which we are covering here today with the great wordsmith and weekly ranker of our generation, Mr. Pat Thorman. Number 11, Thorman. Cowboys, can they still play fast with the offensive line worse, running backs a mess, lack of wide receiver depth? This team is declining in talent. Will they still continue to play fast here, Thorman?
I think they will. I think all indications are that this is who they are at this point. I know last year we were a little bit worried about how Mike McCarthy would do as a play caller, and I think they kind of overwhelmingly passed that test. They were first in average play clock seconds. Again, they were first in situation neutral pace. They jumped all the way up to sixth in pass rate at 61% during neutral situations, which was quite a leap. And frankly, they probably would have thrown more had they not had so many blowout game scripts. They were seventh in pass rate through the first three quarters, and then 24th during the fourth quarters because they had so many big leads. And I don't see that pass rate coming down too much this year. I mean, they got a clown car in the backfield that I don't think is going to really sway them to start, grounding and pounding. They may not be first in points again, but I think, as far as play volume is concerned, they're going to be in that same neighborhood as last year. They were third prior seasons. They were second, eighth. So I think we can be pretty confident the Cowboys playing fast again.
I want to say one thing about the offensive line because Brandon Thorn has the Cowboys as a top 10 offensive line this year. Maybe not as good as last year, but they are bringing back the best guard duo in the NFL, and Tyler Smith and Zach Martin. Terrence Steele has been at least league average starter at right tackle. And their left tackle is a first round pick. So Brandon Thorn is pretty upbeat on the offensive line. One thing I wanted to ask Thorman about though, so they change. Mike Zimmer is going to be their defensive coordinator now, and I don't think he's going to allow them to go through the run defense issues that they had last year. How do you think that might interact with their offensive pace, or do you think it might not have a big effect at all?
I think if their run defense is better, if anything, that's going to help the amount of plays that get run in a game. Because if other team is possessing the ball, running it a lot, clock's ticking, that takes fewer plays. Dallas offense will run fewer plays. That takes fewer plays. That makes the game have fewer plays. So the better the run defense, the worse the pass defense. As a general rule, that's better for pace.
Yeah, on offensive line, I didn't mean to say Dallas have bad offensive line. Just we're so used to them having elite offensive line, I think. And now, to have them as a top 10 unit, I think is fair. The other thing Thorman mentioned, I just want to highlight. One of the reasons Dallas players were so successful versus ADP last year is because they ran so many plays. Second in the NFL in plays per game, 67.3. We'll get to the team that was first, but that is a lot of plays. And that was despite the defense returning 5 interceptions for a touchdown, which led the NFL, and they had a fumble return for a touchdown. That stuff is play volume killers, man. When your defense kind of goes out there and gets a pick six or a fumble return for a touchdown, that reduces your play volume a lot. So they were second in the NFL in plays per game despite that. Really high floor here, given what Thorman said on all of their guys. And yeah, I talked about Dak a little bit on Market Monday as well. Certainly like him once again. Let's go to the number 10 story here. Raiders' downside potential on snaps and pace is low. This was one that I noticed in your article, Thorman. How bad do you think it could be for the Las Vegas Raiders this year in terms of snaps and pace?
Yeah, well, we saw it last year once Antonio Pierce took over, and he clearly wants to establish it. He's repeatedly talked this offseason about taking care of the football, which they did really well last year once he took over. And those things really aren't recipes for fast, pass heavy, high play volume approaches. Then you bring in Luke Getsy from Chicago, who just coordinated the most run heavy and the second most run heavy offenses the last 2 years. You got Aiden O'Connell and you got Minshew. I don't think they're going to really inspire a shift to a high pass rate, unless the Raiders are forced to. Last year, once Pierce took over, they were 29th in pace, and Getsy's Bears ranked 31st and 31st in pace during his 2 years in Chicago. So the Raiders are averaging only 60.7 snaps per game last year under Pierce was not a surprise. That would have been 27th on the full season. So I think we're going to need game scripts to go sideways pretty early to kind of pull them out of their shell, because I highly doubt that they're going to willingly open things up on offense.
Right. I mean, clearly want to establish it. I mean, they go like 4 deep at tight end. They use the 13th pick on Brock Bowers. Michael Mayer was the 35th overall pick just last year. They signed Harrison Bryant, a Mackey Award winner, and Zach Gentry. They signed from Cincinnati, and he's played quality snaps in the NFL. So I mean, they're going to go. They have no depth at receiver. They're going to be like a 2 and even 3 tight end team, I think.
Yeah, I like Antonio Pierce, man. I like listening to his press conferences. I think he's inspiring the team. He could be a total boomer though. Like if you hear some of his quotes, like he could just be an absolute stone cold boomer and just like try to go 3 yards in a cloud of dust and ride a defense, which actually I don't know what you guys think. Actually, their defense could be pretty good. Like they might have a legit good defense this year. And to Thorman's point, yeah, of course, if game script gets away, they'll have to throw a lot. But I'm not sure game script's going to get away from them because I actually think the defense is going to be very, very good. So yeah, it's cause for concern for me somewhat on Devontae, Jacoby Myers. I do like Zamir in half PPR and Bowers probably a little bit more than maybe this would suggest. But yeah, the snaps and pace stuff is certainly scary. Let's go to number 9. Eagles' upside potential on pace this year is sky high. Big change here. Of course, Thorman is Kellen Moore is now the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. What is their outlook this year in terms of pace?
I think you're right. I think it is sky high, and we don't have to look back very far to see it. I mean, just 2 seasons ago, they played fast, they ran a lot of plays, they scored a ton of points. And like you mentioned, they're replacing Brian Johnson at OC, who was pretty clearly in over his head, with Kellen Moore, who consistently produces fast offenses. Last year, the Eagles fell from first in pace to 17th. And you look at Moore's offenses historically, his 5 years as an offensive coordinator, they were first, second, fourth, and fourth in pace. Eagles fell in average play clock seconds. Kellen Moore's offenses are always high in that. Last year, the Chargers were second in play clock seconds. They fell in play volume, not a ton, but a decent amount. And Moore's offenses are usually pretty high in play volume too, second, sixth, and eighth. And then the pass rate fell, which was kind of the most noticeable thing. They fell from 10th to 23rd in pass rate during neutral situations. Moore's offenses have typically been pretty balanced, especially when he was in Dallas. But they're also generally pass heavier than the Eagles were last year. So whether we think Moore is a good offensive coordinator or a bad offensive coordinator, and there's certainly people on both sides of that. The thing we definitely know is he gives us some fast offenses, so we should probably plan on that being the case again with the Eagles.
Yeah, and I think this, people have made a lot of the loss of Jason Kelce, and I mean he, is like a Hall of Famer. But they still look really strong on the offensive line. Cam Jurgens was a second round. He's going to take over for Jason Kelce. He was a second round pick 2 years ago. Lane Johnson is back, still playing at a really high level. Landon Dickerson has become a star. Jordan Mailata is a star. So I mean, they are just so loaded on offense that they're going to they're going to impose their will on teams.
Yeah, I mean, Eagles got into a lot of fast-paced games last year. Even though their pace regressed to 17th, as Thorman said, they still ran the 8th most plays per game. In large part, I thought because their secondary was getting shredded so hard, it was just like, well, they give up some big plays in the pass game, turn it around, and let's get Jalen Hurts the ball back. And by the way, Jalen Hurts, I thought played much of last year banged up with the knee, bone bruise or whatever it was. And I think just a total reset for the Eagles. So we're big on Eagles offense this year, pretty far ahead of market on both Hurts and Devonta Smith in the early going here of draft season. Let's go to number 8. All right. Old friend Aaron Rodgers. Now, the history on Aaron Rodgers here, Thorman, is that he bleeds the clock, right? But that's one side of the token. On the other side of the token, he has been extremely friendly to number 1 wide receivers or whoever he likes throwing to the most, and extremely friendly to running back fantasy scoring as well, despite all this literally running the play clock down to like 1 on seemingly every play. So how do you square that, Thorman, and what's your outlook for Jets pace this year?
Well, it's not all doom and gloom, but you're right. Bottom line is Rodgers just bleeds the play clock. He's been doing it for years. It's super annoying for fantasy. He does it consistently. His last three offenses have been 31st, 32nd, and 32nd in pace. His average play clock seconds are egregious, especially relative to the league. Those last three offenses, they were 5.8, 6.1, and 6.6 seconds. And just for reference, the NFL average last year was about 10 seconds.
Right. That's how much Thorman's referring to how much time is remaining on the play clock when the ball is snapped, correct?
Yes. So when Rodgers is snapping the ball, it's around 6 seconds left. Last year's slowest offense was the Niners when Rodgers was hurt. They were at almost 8 seconds. So it's like an order of magnitude worse than everybody else. The good news is for the Jets' volume is their defense is going to be awesome again. And they're going to get the ball back for the offense pretty consistently, pretty quickly. And Rodgers is going to have an efficient offense, I would imagine, a lot more efficient than they had last year. So they're going to be able to extend drives. So I don't think the Jets' specific play volume is going to be terrible. I think the play volume overall in their games is going to be bad because Rodgers is just bleeding clock whenever they have the ball. So the other team is probably not going to be running a lot of plays. So I think in total, Jets games will be low volume. I don't think that the Jets are going to be quite as hurting for plays as you might think at first.
I also wonder if it just might not be that big of a deal because you look at the structure of their offensive skill positions and it should be very concentrated. I mean, there should just be, guys that we know are going to get the ball. And then, I mean, they're top heavy in their skill position core. Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, maybe Mike Williams will make a little bit of an impact, but then we're talking about, a third round rookie in Malachi Corley, Xavier Gibson, maybe, their tight ends are Tyler Conklin and Jeremy Rucker. It should be very concentrated in terms of where the ball is going to go. And therefore we don't necessarily need extreme play volume.
I mean, the way that Rodgers has won in the past in fantasy has been through straight efficiency, like mind-bending efficiency. So even though he doesn't have that many plays, even though he doesn't give you a lot of rushing stuff, he's just so efficient in terms of touchdowns and interceptions and all that he's been so good in real life, really, and reasonable in fantasy, at least, in spite of all these other things that we're talking about. Now, relying on Aaron Rodgers to be extremely efficient once again at age 41 or whatever he is off the Achilles and everything, I understand that's a further leap, but man, it's going to be way, way, way better than last season. And I have no problem with Breece in round one and Garrett Wilson in round one also.
He's also a guy that will just target the bejesus out of individual players. You think back to Jordy Nelson, and obviously with Devontae Adams, look at his target totals in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. Like he will just throw the ball repeatedly to a guy that's getting open and the guy that he trusts. And I think that Garrett Wilson obviously has the talent to make that happen.
Certainly. All right. Number 7, Bo Nix layers in some pace upside for the Broncos. Now, I went back and looked at this. Oregon was only 78th in college football last season in plays per game, which surprised me a little bit. Perhaps that's because they're ripping off 30, and 80-yard touchdowns on seemingly every play, et cetera. But anyways, Thorman, how do you think Sean Payton, who finally has a quarterback to call his own? I don't think he ever really wanted Russ. He blew some smoke up our ass with Stidham. He finally got a guy that he actually wants, it seems, in Bo Nix. How do you think that Payton and Nix play it now?
I guess I'm a little bit more worried about this one than about the Jets specifically for play volume. I mean, Nix, he did play with some tempo at Oregon, like you mentioned, and the offense, could conceivably click right away between him and Peyton. But I think our base case should probably be that it's going to be a slow offense again. Last year they were 26th in play clock seconds remaining when they snapped it. They were 27th in pace, 29th in pass rate, 29th in play volume. And that may change a little bit with Russ gone, but unless, Nix is going to inspire like heavy downfield passing, that run rate is actually going to be even worsened by the fact that they dump off the ball to running backs constantly, which are, essentially kind of long handoffs that go in the passing column. Peyton still loves to mix those multiple personnel packages, on and off the field. They take a long time to get on, grind clock when that happens. So, on top of them being a low volume offense, they produced low scoring games. Last year they were 39. They scored 39 points per game in total after week 5. So while I think Nix could elevate things, there are lots of names on the various positional depth charts in Denver, and it's tough to kind of project enough play volume to confidently like say we're going to have enough fantasy opportunity here.
Yeah.
I think when you look at the complexion of their offense, like they should be, and I know they're going to run quick game. Think like Teddy Bridgewater with Bo Nix at quarterback, under Sean Payton, obviously. But I think that if you look at the complexion of their roster, they have a powerful offensive line. They go pretty deep at running back. Javonte Williams, he was a volume runner at times last year. Julian McLaughlin, they're going to use him in certain packages. Audric Estime, they drafted in the 5th round. Apparently, they had a 3rd round grade on him. He's a classic first and second down, power back with long speed. I know he ran slow at the combine, but he ran fast at his pro day. But I mean, if you just look at and as you mentioned, like they are willing to play multiple tight ends. How much do they really like their receiver core anyway? Cortland Sutton has seemed like he's, is he even going to be on the roster? I think at this point he probably is, but that, there was doubt about that. Troy Franklin was a 4th round pick. Josh Reynolds has been, kind of a jag. And Marvin Mims, I mean, Sean Payton couldn't even make a commitment to getting him on the field consistently last year. So if you just look at their personnel on offense, like they set up to be a slow-paced ground and pound team.
Yeah, I mean, if you tell me this team is not going to have a lot of plays and there's so much competition at all of the spots, like I'm not even convinced that Greg Dulcich is that far ahead of Lucas Kroll anymore. I mean, he probably is, but I don't know for sure. And so, like Evan mentioned, all the different wide receivers and all the different running backs they have, it's hard to make bets here. Mentioned more on that on Market Monday too, if you guys are interested. But yeah, for redraft, Broncos stuff is going to be a tough sell for me. I mostly do it now as like emergency late round backdoors in best ball. When it gets to home league season, I doubt that I'll have very much interest in really any Broncos. All right, let's go to number 6. Chiefs wide receiver upgrades will keep the pace high. So one thought that I had last year when watching the Chiefs was like, they have one of the best defenses in the league and they can win with defense and run game. Now, that would be a waste of Patrick Mahomes' talent, but they kind of did that with defense, a very short. I mean, Patrick Mahomes' ADOT just keeps going down and down and down, lower and lower and lower. But now you add Xavier Worthy and you add Hollywood Brown, I think that the Chiefs will start going long again. That's more of a philosophical change than a pace change. But anyways, Thorman, any thoughts on Chiefs outlook here?
Yeah, I think they're related. It opens things up, kind of opens the game up. Hopefully the defense isn't quite as good as it was last year. Maybe Nola Jarius Sneed out there is going to help a little bit as far as getting the pace up in their games. But I think, like you mentioned, like their actions and their words have kind of showed a renewed focus on the downfield passing game. Mahomes has talked about it. Reed has talked about it. They brought in those weapons, like you said. And like you also said about his ADOT, was 6.8 yards last year, which was a career low and had been trending that direction for years. The good thing was, they still played fast. They were 3rd in average play clock seconds when they snapped it. They were 6th in pace. They still threw a ton. They were 1st in pass rate over expectation for the 5th straight year. So if all that short passing and that improved defense kind of eases up a little bit, I think they're still that same team that we want to invest in their games, which used to be high scoring. And last year they were 27th in total points. So like I said, I think they do go hand in hand, getting that explosive element back and increasing that pace of their game quite a bit.
They also defensively should remain really, really stout and get the ball back to the offense. I realize that they lost L'Jarius Sneed. He had an awesome year last year, but they got back Chris Jones and they were loaded on young talent. They just got really hot in the draft. And they also picked up a bunch of athletic linebackers. And those guys are returning. So, defensively, like they should, and obviously they're really well coached under Steve Spagnuolo, but they should get the ball back to the offense consistently once again. They were like a defensive-minded team last year, and I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of fall off on defense this season.
Yeah, I mean, like Thorman said, they only averaged 21. Let me make sure I get this right. 21.8 points per game last year. That was less than the Jaguars, Texans, Packers, Colts, Browns, Saints, Rams, all scored more points per game than the Kansas City Chiefs last year. And so, yeah, I think you're getting some discounts here on their guys, especially where Hollywood Brown goes, where Xavier Worthy goes, even where Pacheco goes, I think you could make a case, especially on underdog, make a case for a discount on him too, with the expectation that this team is still going to play fast and still is going to be really, really efficient. All right. Well, let's get to last year's Kings here, Thorman. Last year, the Cleveland Browns led the entire NFL in plays per game. Now, there was some fluky stuff in there. They played some overtime stuff, et cetera, et cetera. But there's no doubt this team played fast. I think the question this year is, we expect Deshaun Watson back. How does that change things, if at all? And Thorman, will they maintain their reign as the kings of plays per game?
I think they're the favorite for a lot of reasons. They ranked sixth in pace when Watson took his last snap last year. For the average play clock seconds, his games were faster than the other quarterbacks' games, including Joe Flacco. Now the difference is they were only 20. The pass rate was only 24th highest under Watson, which had increased dramatically when Flacco took over. Where that pass rate regresses to is going to be the biggest factor, in Cleveland's overall pace this year. So you get Ken Dorsey coming in there. His influence as an OC should help. His Bills were 5th and 8th in situation neutral pace when he was there. They brought in Jerry Jeudy. Nick Chubb's continued, questionable health. That's probably contributes to maybe some more throwing. I think a lot of their moves have signified that they want to throw at a higher rate, which is good because Cleveland's their play volume floor is pretty high just because their defense is so awesome, kind of similar to the Jets. They're going to keep getting the ball back. They're going to consistently get the ball back quickly. So I think that's one of the main reasons last year that even though their offense was really inefficient for most of the season, they ran so many plays. Was a large credit goes to the defense. So this year, if they can maintain the fast pace that they had under Watson, they can have an elevated pass rate like they had under Flacco. In addition to having that high floor from the Browns defense, they can easily lead the league in plays again. And I think, like I said before, I think that they probably are the favorite.
And their offensive inefficiency was obviously, driven strongly by, first of all, the fact they had a ton of offensive line injuries, and also the fact they played like 5 different quarterbacks. Yeah. So we'll see on Deshaun Watson. But, the big story in Cleveland this offseason has been that they're going to be more of a spread team, and that makes sense with no Nick Chubb. I'm not sure that Nick Chubb is even necessarily going to play this year. They're saying that they're hoping for him to return late in the season. But then you look at their other backs, and they're kind of spread backs. Jerome Ford can catch the ball out of the backfield. Nyheim Hines is like a classic spread back. Pierre Strong can play in the passing game. Yeah. So, yeah, I think they're going to be a spread team, and I think they should definitely continue to play fast, and another team that has a really talented defense that should get the ball back to the offense.
I mean, they're skill players I actually like. I mean, Amari Cooper, Judy, Elijah Moore, and Njoku, that's pretty nice set to go spread with. And they also have Cedric Tillman, who's been getting some buzz here this offseason. As Evan mentioned, when you have Jerome Ford as your starter, and I do think Dante Foreman's going to play a lot, but Jerome Ford as your feature back, that lends to more spread and passing as well, like Evan said. So, yeah, I feel pretty good about our Browns bets so far. We just need Deshaun Watson's shoulder to stay on right, because I do think that all the off-field stuff is one thing, and I'm certain that it's contributed to what's been going on with him, but the shoulder stuff is really my bigger concern at this
Hopefully
point.
Jameis Winston's in there right around week 3.
That would be interesting.
Wouldn't that be fun? Oh, my God.
All right. Number 4 is the rookie quarterback and new offensive coordinator in Washington outlook. One thing I did want to note here, if you have DraftKit Pro, you hopefully read Thorne's article. Washington Commanders dead last in Thorne's offensive line ranking. Stone cold dead last this year as the Commanders' offensive line. At the same time, they're trying to break in a rookie quarterback, and you have this dolt, Cliff Kingsbury, calling the plays. So I like Jaden Daniels. I don't want to get too crazy here. And I could see them, Thorman. I could see them being like, we have all these offensive line problems. We have rookie quarterback. Why don't we slow it down a little bit here? So I could see that. But yeah, what do you think about how it's going to go in Washington this year?
Well, they're not going to lead the league in pass rate again. That's for sure. But I think the offense still will probably be faster. To what degree, remains to be seen. And I guess that's kind of counterintuitive to run more and have a faster offense. But with Kingsbury's Cardinals, I think everyone's probably seen the stat by now that his 4 years in Arizona, they were first in pace and first in the hover rate, over that span.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at Washington, there's a pretty big gap there. I mean, they were 20th, 22nd, and 31st in pace over the last 3 years. So if they can, there's plenty of room to make up there. And Washington ran only the 19th most plays last year, despite leading the league in pass rate. And Kingsbury's Cardinals were fourth, and sixth in play volume. So they can still make up that gap, even if they're not quite as fast as Kingsbury's Cardinals were. And while they're not going to ask Jaden Daniels to chuck it around, especially not right away, over the the offensive line needs to solidify, especially. But Washington's secondary is still shaky. They have no pass rush on the edge. Their pass D could be really conducive to having some shootouts. And when you bring a fast pace into shootouts, you're gonna get plenty of play volume for everybody, and that brings kind of the ancillary fantasy pieces for Washington kind of a little more onto the radar. Which
I think that the way that the Texans or the Commanders are trying to build is sort of in the same way that the Texans have been trying to build under Nick Caserio with the super early draft pick at quarterback. The way that they approach free agency, they signed a ton of guys to kind of just throwing darts at the wall on both sides of the ball, and they're hoping that something sticks. In Houston, a lot of stuff stuck, but I don't know if they're going to have the same result in Washington. To me, they are just a total crapshoot team. I think there is a chance that they could surprise if Jaden Daniels has a rookie year, at like 80% of CJ Stroud or something like that. But I don't know. They're a really difficult team, I think, to project, and it's probably on the safe side to be pessimistic overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to come down to how well Jaden Daniels plays. Because I agree with Thorman. If Jaden Daniels is good, the way Cliff wants to play is really fast, right? He wants to be playing this real up-tempo, no-huddle style, but you need a competent quarterback to do so. So all the reports out of Washington so far, which doesn't mean very much, have been very strong on Jaden Daniels. My lean is that he's going to be good right out of the gate, but I don't feel overly strongly about it all. And I think it'll be hard for anyone to really feel strongly about that at this point. So we'll see. Number 3. Thorman had to get this one off his chest. Shane Waldron is misunderstood on pace. Thorman, I give you the floor to get this off your chest now. Shane Waldron, of course, formerly offensive coordinator of the Seahawks. And by the way, the Seahawks were dead last in plays per game last season. Now Shane Waldron is the offensive coordinator for Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears.
It's understandable, and I've seen it in a bunch of places for a lot of analysts that I really respect, and so it makes sense that you see a team that just runs an egregiously low number of plays. You're going to assume that they're slow paced, because those two things are so often connected. And that just wasn't the case last year in Seattle. I mean, they were 8th in situation neutral pace. They had the 9th most play clock seconds remaining when they snapped it. They just couldn't stay on the field on offense, and they couldn't get off the field on defense. Seattle had the 6th worst third down success rate. They were 21st in EPA per play on third downs, and the defense was worse on third downs. They were 30th in success rate, 31st in third down conversions allowed. They were last in EPA per play on third downs. So the worry for Ryan Grubb coming in as the new OC is that D still has a lot of these same questions, and the offensive line might have more. Brandon Thorn has them as the 4th worst O-line in our offensive line rankings, and they were terrible last year. And Geno didn't perform well under pressure. And while Grubb is known for his high volume, explosive passing game, Seattle already threw it at the 7th highest rate last year, and they already were explosive. They were 5th in explosive rate last year on offense. So they still need to fix what wrecked them last year, regardless of who their play caller is this year, or their defense is going to wind up defending the most plays in the league again.
Yeah. Mike Clay was on the Athletic podcast not too long ago, and he suggested, and he approaches offensive line analysis in a different way than Brandon Thorman, almost the opposite way. He's relying on metrics. He suggested that the Seahawks could have the worst offensive line in the NFL this year. And that was a little bit scary to me. And he's usually pretty good with his unit grades and things like that. I'm concerned about Seattle's offense for sure. I think that Tyler Lockett showed signs of decline last season. We're changing OCs, we're changing everything in Seattle. And so I don't know what to expect. I think I'm going to end up being pessimistic on them this year.
We'll talk more about Seattle and Chicago on the coach change show. The guy I've taken most so far on Seattle is Jackson Smith and Jigba, by far. I just thought the way Shane Waldron used him last year was inexcusable, and I do not expect that to continue. But yeah, that's not a pace-related issue at all. So we'll save that for the coaching change pod. All right. How about a sleeper for the people, Thorman, in terms of up pace? The New York Giants, I believe, were 19th in plays per game last year. Now they get Daniel Jones back, allegedly healthy. They draft Malik Neighbors. They have Wan'Dale healthy as well. Maybe a sleeper here, Thorman, for the people in pace and the Giants, or any other sleepers that you want to mention.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely a deep sleeper. It takes a little bit of squinting, but I think the main point is Brian Dable's goal is traditionally been for his offense to throw it and to move at a pretty good pace. His last year with the Bills as OC, they were third in average play clock seconds when they snapped it. They were eighth in no huddle rate. His first season in New York, they were seventh in play clock seconds, eighth in no huddle rate. Even last year when they were a total train wreck, the Giants were fourth in play clock seconds and fifth in no huddle rate during neutral situations. So it wasn't just them going fast when they were getting their asses kicked, which there was plenty of that. But they were going by intention. They were going fast. And so Dable has shown that he wants to pass first like he did in Buffalo. And now there's no more bell cow in the backfield in New York. The offensive line shouldn't be the complete disaster that it was last year. Malik Neighbors should help Danny Dimes out a little bit. It's a thin bet, but it's cheap for the most part, other than Neighbors. And you get a little bonus that the Giants are going to play exclusively, fast-paced opponents in the NFC East. So at least for those 6 games at minimum, they'll have their tempo kind of picked up by their opponent.
I don't really have a whole lot to add to that. The Giants. My bold prediction for the Giants this year is that Drew Lock starts more games than Danny Dimes. So that's all I got to add there.
Any other sleepers, Thorman? I threw out Giants here. Any other sleepers that you think is off the radar that could be way more up in pace this year versus last year?
I think the Titans, just based on their jump in pass rate, is and potentially some garbage time. Although we don't usually look at neutral situations for the most part, but I think you can get some end of game craziness with them, especially because their division games are going to be, the Colts are going to be fast paced. Houston could very well be. Jacksonville is better than average pace wise. So I think as far as another gross offense, I think the Titans probably qualify there.
See, I don't think it's gross at all. We're going to talk about the coaching change stuff in the Titans a lot because I think one of the biggest philosophical changes of this season, obviously the Falcons are one. I think the Titans are going to have just a massive shift, just complete.
Yeah,
overhaul.
I mean, just based on the simple fact that you are going from Derrick Henry in the backfield to Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears, like your whole offense changes.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think the Titans could finish like top 5 in a pass rate above expectation. You mentioned the Texans. The Texans, I think we have really high expectations for their offense. They have issues in the secondary, and they can be really, really tough in run defense. So I think that they add up to be a team that could remain a shootout team and play up in pace for sure.
Okay. The number one thing you must know about snaps and pace for the 2024 fantasy football season: Colts will not be slowing down for Anthony Richardson. One of the reasons that I'm so excited about Anthony Richardson for this year is because Shane Steichen, I like Shane Steichen, first of all, and second of all, they're going to play extremely fast. I mean, if I had Gardner Minshew last year, I would have been like, you know what, man, let's just take it easy here for a little bit. They did not. They did the exact opposite. So, Thorman, how do you think the outlook is for Colts here getting a rich back?
I think it's strong. I don't think they're going to slow down with him at all. I don't think Shane Steichen has ever really given much of an indication that that's what he wants. I think the only wild card here is pass rate, and that's just kind of taking us off a baseline that we already established last year. Like with Richardson as a rookie last year, they were 21st in situation neutral pass rate. That should be viewed as a floor. I don't think they're gonna run more than that. And still last year they were first in both pace and no huddle rate with Richardson. They were third in average play clock seconds. And then when you look at the weekly average play clock seconds, they were fast in each one of Richardson's 4 starts. In that 5-week range, the only game they were slow was the week 3 when Gardner Minshew started. So the Colts games with Richardson, they were first in combined play volume and 7th in total points. The Colts' own play volume was a little bit spotty, but if we've already seen that pass rate floor, we're going to be fine. I mean, the secondary still looks shaky. They get 6 potentially fast-paced, high-scoring division games like we just were talking about. And the bottom line is they can run just as much as they ran last year and still give us fast games. And it's not out of the question that in year 2 with him, they might throw a little more, which you'd love to see that as well.
Yeah, they also made significant additions or significant moves, at least, in the passing game. They drafted A.D. Mitchell in the 2nd round. Josh Downs enters his 2nd year. They gave a big deal to Michael Pittman. So, yeah, I would expect the pass rate to go up. It was interesting. Leone and Gretsch had a conversation about this very topic, and Gretsch was thinking that maybe potentially Shane Steichen could be scared off a little bit at the prospect of increasing Anthony Richardson's pass rate because he got hurt twice last year. So I think that is an interesting possibility. But I think ultimately the offseason moves, just the progression, the trajectory of their passing game as a unit suggests that they should throw the ball more and that they will throw the ball more.
Yeah, I don't think that Shane Steichen is the kind of guy that's going to play scared about Anthony Richardson's injuries. I think that, though, it's possible Anthony Richardson is like a bottom 7 passer, like pure thrower in the NFL, and that would scare me from them throwing the ball a lot. But yeah, still, I don't think it really matters for fantasy as much as it matters for real life, because if they're running a lot, it's going to be Anthony Richardson running plenty as well on RPOs and design stuff also. All right. This was fun. Learned a lot on pace and offensive philosophy outlook. We'll be back next week, most likely, with Silva, Daigle, and myself with an important show to go through every coaching change and play caller change in the NFL ahead of the 2024 season and what that means for fantasy. Stay tuned for that. Thorman, tell the people where they can find you, your rankings, your pace, all that.
It's all at Establish the Run on Twitter. Not as much as I used to be, but at Pat_Thorman. Mental health reasons, not mixing it up on Twitter as much as I have been. But yeah, exclusively on Establish the Run, you can find my stuff.
Yes, if you're interested more in Snaps and Pace, if you have Draft Kit Pro, Thorman Snaps and Pace full preview is up there now. He also writes a weekly article during the season highlighting which games, and it's really good for DFS too, which games are more likely to be up in pace versus down in pace, create more plays. And of course, his weekly rankings are part of Draft Kit Pro. Also, good luck in the competition this year, Thorman. I know this is like on your tombstone. It's going to say like Thorman was top 10 in Fantasy Pros rankings contest in 7 out of the last 11 years or something. So it's a great honor to have for Thorman. For Silva, producer Ryan, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.